Hi there. Oh, welcome to Creation Station Monthly. This is our show every month where we feature two strangers who meet for the first time and talk about a topic that they're passionate about. It's November, so we always feature something about veterans. And this year we are doing veteran artists. We have two people who deal with art and veterans and work really hard at doing this. Steve and Anthony, welcome very much to the show. Anthony, tell us about what you do. Well, first off, Combat Hippies is an amazing name, by the way. Tell us about what you do and how you do it. And then, Steve, just jump right in.
Sure. I worked in mental health in the Army for 4 years. I was stationed at Fort Hood, and I deployed to Iraq from '04 to '05. And I relocated to Florida in 2006 after the military. The goal was just to go to school. But I was a journalism major before active duty, and I always loved poetry, and I was doing a lot of writing. So I started going to Miami area writing workshops, and folks were writing about, the typical things. I don't know, the beach, their dogs, and I was talking about my first day in Iraq and stuff like that. Just trying to find an outlet to kind of process and tell my story. And I went to a writing workshop for veterans. This was in the spring of 2015, and it was every weekend for about 4 months, and it culminated. Supposed to be an open mic, kind of like a reading. We turned it into a 45-minute performance with music, and I mean, it was like this 3-act performance. It was at the Betsy Hotel in South Beach, down in Miami Beach, and it was just this amazing experience. And everyone said we should keep doing this. And from there, we started touring locally, local colleges, local theaters, Live Arts Miami. Brought it all together. I'm so grateful for that organization. They continue to be a dear friend and collaborator. They commissioned the show, and we went on to make another show, toured that around the country. Last year, we went to Puerto Rico and Dallas for a theater festival. So it's been
Nice.
an amazing experience. And honestly, the biggest thing is, of course, engaging veterans, military and veterans, but also partners, spouses, children, people who are working with veterans, whether it's a VA or local universities. That's been like really cool to kind of be able to create space, share my story, and then use the work as a platform to just kind of talk about all these, really complicated, sometimes painful experiences and stories.
It is fun. Steve, tell us, where is the Veterans Art Project out there? And tell us all about how you got started with this thing.
Tony, it's a pleasure to meet you, and Bob, pleasure to be invited. Really appreciate this opportunity to share our program. As I like to say, 9/11 affected me deeply, and I had an MFA in ceramics when that happened, having just been newly minted in 2000. And, some of my undergrad work had looking at Glenn Lukens, and also we know that in San Diego here, there was kind of a reoccurring thing happened in the newspaper. Was a Marine, 2003, 2004, Marine extended deployment, coming back with a stack of money, buying a motorcycle and mixing it with a 30-pack of beer. And I really felt that, what a waste to have put someone in harm's way, and then to lose them after they got back here and they were safe. And I had this kind of harebrained idea that, and looking at, working with military veterans and thinking that art making was a way that I had always found a way to survive. And I felt that, might be valuable to other members of our community. And, and one thing led to another. Of course, my first ceramic instructor at college was a Marine, and my last graduate instructor in college was a Marine. And they were.
We are everywhere.
They are everywhere, and
I was a Marine. We are everywhere.
Oh.
Yeah, all right, I'm the odd man out, but.
You do amazing work, Steve. No. You guys do amazing work there with veterans. That's why you're on this show, because you got some amazing stuff out there.
I appreciate that. So, one thing led to another, and And we ran a bronze foundry, worked with the Intrepid Spirit Center for a number of years up in off of Camp Pendleton. And now we live in a 5,000 square foot facility here in Vista, California. And we do ceramics and glass casting. We're offering classes. We do pop-up cafes. And, just continuing to kind of like, I don't know, hold the flag up and say, hey, you might like this. It's not for everyone. It's hard work. It's heavy. It's dirty. Air conditioned, and there's no air conditioning or heat. It's kind of like come in here and go for
Something
it.
we're kind of used to, I think. Yeah. So here, I wanted one of the things that we always talk about is who was a mentor for you guys? How did you get started in this to feel like, wait a minute, I've got this idea of something. How do I make it happen? How did you help out with that? Who helped you with that? Either just go for it and feedback.
I invited a poetry organization to the Miami VA. I was working evenings and weekends on the residential programs. I was a mental health tech. I would do, kind of group support and individual, even though I wasn't a licensed clinician at the time. I am now. But every Friday night they had kind of recreation therapy events and programming. So I was going around the city doing writing workshops and poetry events or participating in them. And I invited them to the Miami VA, and they came. I was handing out poetry to all the veterans that were in the programs. I was like, look, you're going to like this one. They're cursing a lot in there. I was handing out Langston Hughes and Brian Turner, Iraq War poet from Orlando. And it ended up being this really awesome night. And Live Arts Miami said, look, we have this actor, writer, director. He's a Puerto Rican theater artist from Miami named Teo Castellanos. We'd like to have him facilitate a writing workshop for veterans. He had no military background, but he had experience working with kind of non-professionally trained people. He just a lot of experience in the community. And I said, well, let's meet, we'll talk about it. I was there as a participant. I was also recruiting for this workshop. But we met, and right off the bat, I said, this guy is amazing. I think his work is entirely focused on community and vulnerability and telling our stories and healing. And I was like, oh, this guy, this is it. And he was a bit concerned about being, a civilian working with us. And I said, no, man, I said, it's even better that, we can come together and then we can share this work with the broader community. And that's exactly what happened. And he's been a mentor for me for the last 10 years. He's a Zen Buddhist priest, actually. So we our company classes for my theater company, we start with meditation. We're very mindful of the things that we're bringing in mentally, emotionally, physically to the work. It's really handled. I did an interview for TCG magazine, a theater magazine, and they asked me kind of what is it that he does, that's so impactful. And I said, he creates a safe space. And the journalist asked, well, what does that mean? And I just said, by modeling vulnerability, by being himself, by also treating everything that we're discussing and that we're sharing with care and respect. And it was all men. It created a space for us to be vulnerable and to share, fears or regrets or maybe, things we're ashamed of or deeply personal things. And what came out of that was a couple of, productions that I'm really proud of. And he continues to be my mentor to this day and really opened me to the wider arts community of kind of arts, cultural workers, activists across the country. So I'm very grateful for meeting Teo.
Tell us, Steve.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, the whole idea of being vulnerable is not, it's like strength in the arts, where in the military, being vulnerable isn't strong at all. So there's a flip that happens there. I like to think that force impact of creativity is, an opportunity to share what's deeply personal. But once people share that what's deeply personal, they find that it's profoundly universal. And when that happens, it's an opportunity for discussions to happen that normally wouldn't happen. And, if I'm going to talk about two mentors real quick, Glenn Houston was a friend of mine that I knew from the ceramic community. And he was teaching, living in Northern California, up there to do a wood fire. And we were, late at night sitting around having some drinks. And he goes, "Hey, Steve, it was me postgraduate school." And he really we had a moment to have a discussion about what's your vision. And at the time, I didn't have an answer to that question. But it's a hell of a question, because you get to assess, like, what do you really want to do with this achievement that you did, which was graduate school, and what do you want to do with it afterwards? And I think that knowing myself as a 9-year-old kid that wanted to be a firefighter, I always wanted to help people. And so I get to still be that 9-year-old kid.
That is the line I always use. It's not what do you want to do, it's what do you want to fix. Who do you want to help?
So there is that, and creativity and the clay and the material and the process, the practice is the medicine, and how it worked for me. And I had another strong Vietnam era vet named Michael Aschenbrenner, and Michael, noted glass artist, and I knew him in undergraduate school, and I was really trying to figure out what's going on in vet art. No, what's going on in me as an undergraduate, and he really helped me to understand that all that you feel as an artist, all that you feel is a part of all of being alive, right? And of course, I interviewed him again for my graduate school. So, Glenn Houston and Michael Aschenbrenner are a couple of people I always look up as really great mentors that kind of set me on this path that I never intended. I just kind of found myself on it. One thing leads to another, and here we are now.
Steve, I got to tell you, I feel the same exact way about the universality of these experiences.
Yes.
I worked in a hospital at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. That's a very unique experience, that many people cannot relate to. On the other hand, being far away from family, longing for loved ones, not feeling sick, being scared, all the emotions and experience, anyone can relate to that range of experiences, even joy, love, peace, happiness.
Yes.
And that was really cool to tell, this work. We're telling very specific, unique experiences. But, I talked about my father, who was a National Guardsman in the 80s in New York. And I did a whole poem about looking up to him. And I went in the military because he was in the military. Mm-hmm. And a friend came up to me after our first production, and she said, you guys were in the military, you're men. She goes, but you sharing about your relationship with your dad really touched home for me and reminded me of my relationship with my father. And she thanked me for just sharing that kind of story. So it's really beautiful, the things that happen when you're willing to kind of dive into those things.
Those things totally pop up organically, and it's always fascinating. And I think that artists, as a working class of people, can be equated as shamans. And what do shamans do? They leave the group and they go find some information, and then they bring back from that quest some information that is useful to the group. Well, isn't that the story of our military? That they leave the group and then they go and they do this quest, and things happen, and then they come back, and when they don't have a way to share that, right, that, this is Joseph Campbell stuff, right? Yeah. That circle gets blocked, and we got to hey, man, you're not done with that work. And by bringing it back to us, the civilians that didn't have that experience, right, we can better understand if they have a pathway to sharing that, right? And I just think that's like this weird thing. I don't even understand it myself, but I trust in it that it's something that we need to be thinking about to have these discussions that are deep and thoughtful with our military.
And Steve, you are so right. I mean, Anthony's drum circle here is that is just the picture of doing the shaman thing, of coming back and yeah.
I got to tell you, that grounded us and centered us, and also gave us a sense of purpose and mission in the creative work, that we've been to some dark places, literally and, mentally and emotionally. And that in sharing this with the community, that we're kind of collectively healing. And that's what my director, Teo, has, enforced in us all along. And it gave me a sense, I've been hesitant or concerned, or, am I going to offend people or scare people? It was always grounded in telling my story and expressing myself and telling my truth. And once I was able to settle into that, then I'm like, okay, I'm sharing it. Whatever happens after I share it is not my responsibility, but I am telling my story and sharing my experience. And, it's also cultural. We have the drums in our production, and, this is, in Native American communities, after battle, they would come back and they would be healed by the community. And, they were an active participant in the storytelling. So, yeah.
Well, I think the drums are a really good way, because people are like, man, I like doing this thing, right? And it's like, and after we get done with that drums, right? And it's like, now how do you feel? Right? Because there's a cathartic release there, and people feel that because they're beating it, they're hitting it, they're hitting their heads on the drum, their elbows, they're kicking it. It's physical, and then it's like it manifests, and it's really it transforms it, right? Really
and I got to tell you, Steve, every touring date we've had, we make sure to go to the nearest contemporary art museum. That's like mandatory for me and my director. So whether it was Milwaukee, San Jose, Denver, we performed in New York City in 2020, January 2020. Those things are one and the same for us.
Yeah. I was thinking, there is some discussion of the Invictus Games coming here to San Diego in 4 years, in 29. And so, we should open the discussion, because I'm talking to other museum professionals here in San Diego. Like, if that happens, we also need, even if Invictus Games says, yeah, we don't want to be a part of that, but we can still do it on their timeline and do an art show and bring in people nationally and just figure out, I don't know how to do that, but let's start talking about how to do that, and we'll figure it out. You know what I mean?
That feeds me into a question for you guys. One of the things I typically ask people is, how did you get started being creative? Were you a little kid eating, grass or playing in the mud? Were you dancing, singing? I mean, and because of the military aspect of this, where did you, Anthony, did you be creative and then lose it during the military? Or did you find it in the military, or what?
So it's interesting. So you shared a list of questions, and I was reviewing them an hour or two ago, and I saw that and I laughed at myself because I had to think for a second, and I was like, oh, it's clear to me. It's clear to me. I would just like to do a quick comparison. The poet Brian Turner, he has these stories, he shared that he was writing on little notes and stuffing them into his uniform while he was in Iraq. Just ideas, and his poetry was, he was kind of writing.
I still have my little green notebook that I had on Firewatch. It still sits in the back of my filing cabinet.
I have been a hip hop rap music fanatic my whole life. As a native New Yorker, as a Puerto Rican, Puerto Rican community with the Black community in New York City created, hip hop as a culture. And I grew up in that, immersed in that. And I always loved it. And I never tried to be a rapper, but I started writing. I was really inspired, and I was doing, rap album reviews in high school for journalism, a journalism course I had. And then I always tell folks I started writing bad love poems to my girlfriends. And I was a journalism major out of high school, and I interned at a local newspaper. I dropped out of school. I dropped out of Morrisville State College. It's called SUNY Morrisville at the time in upstate New York. And I was just really struggling with kind of purpose, identity. I was like, what am I doing? What do I want to do? And I was a reservist for 3 years. I was a civil affairs specialist. I decided to go on active duty, and I reclassed to mental health. From that point on, I didn't write again until I relocated to Miami. It didn't cross my mind. I don't know. I think it was just kind of moving on from all things back home. But when I landed back in Miami and started going to poetry readings, it kind of got reignited in me. But I wrote for my school paper. I wrote for the yearbook. You know, I was very shy, so writing was kind of my outlet to express myself way back then. And fast forward into my mid 40s, I can't believe I'm, you know, this is has become a huge part of my life.
Tell us, Steve, how did you start being creative way back when?
You know, I would just I'd like to state for everyone that I'm not a veteran. I just happen to be an artist working with vets, just so that there's no confusion there, because I don't want to claim something that isn't mine. You know, if I look back and I think it had been first or second grade, that we had a field trip in school, and we went to the local airport, Ontario Airport. And of course, when we got back, they gave us crayons, and everyone did pictures, kind of like a kid's picture of a jet plane on the tarmac in profile view. And then all the kids put the sun up here in the corner, and then a blue strip, right? And then what I did is I took that blue strip and brought it all the way down to the horizon line, right? And that's just me, you know, doing observation, because I was like, well, it doesn't look like that. Yeah, the sky's up there, but if you look, you know, that blue comes all the way. So, of course, that teacher picked up my piece and held it up and then pointed out and said, hey, look at you guys. You put this blue strip up here. We all know that's the sky. But look what Steve did, and he brought that horizon line right down to where it met the horizon. You know, that blue line all the way down. And these things are transformative when we're young, right? Someone pays attention to something you've done, and thank God there was art teachers along the way, and it just kind of got a chance to, I don't know, keep at it.
Yeah.
Just lucky, you know what I mean? And I think a natural sense of curiosity probably goes a long way too,
Yeah.
Steve, how long has Veterans Art Project been running?
Thanks, Anthony. We started our first class in 2009 at Grossmont College.
Wow.
So back in 2009, the dominant paradigm is if you had any transition stress or anything else that didn't make you fit into what was normal, they would just, overly medicate you, and I was like, funny story, 2009, I was going into kind of like veteran groups in San Diego and feeling very timid because I wasn't a veteran in that space. And then they were kind of like, you can come in here, but you got to sit in the back and be quiet because we're doing the important work here. And I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I go, don't mind me. I'll just be here and I'll be quiet. Right. And then they would talk about the need. And I think the need here is, suicide. And they would say, okay, these veterans, they keep on killing themselves. Do we have any ideas? And of course, I'd be in the back going like this. And I'm like, and they're like, okay, guy in the back, stand up and state your name. So it's like, so now I'm on the spot. Everyone knows who I am. And I said, we should give them art classes. And of course, there would be a long, and then because they're worried about important stuff like jobs and housing, and those are important things, right? And they would go, are there any other ideas? And then it was kind of like, well, no, I'm really serious. This is something that people can use, right? And I've heard that from my instructors telling me, hey, man, when I came out from Vietnam, man, it was a different world. And I had a ceramics lab, and I just got to dig into that. And 4 years later, I popped up, and, I had a place to put some of that stuff, right? And, and let us not think that the Vietnam vets had an easy road. You know what I mean? And so I always look at that as kind of like part of my advocacy, that I get to say, hey, don't forget this and the power that this offers.
Yeah. I put a link
Mm.
into the show notes for our November 23rd episode on mental health for veterans that we did a couple years ago. The matches along those lines. So tell me, what kind of equipment do you guys use right now? And then the question I always ask is, you got unlimited funds. What are you going to get? What's the dream piece of equipment that's going to make this right for you? No time machines.
No time machines. So I got to tell you, with my director's kind of Zen practice, simplicity was always center for him. No elaborate sets. Our first performance, there were 4 of us, and at one point we bring out chairs. That's about it. And then the most recent show, Amal, which is Arabic for hope. This show, which dug into kind of the history between the United States and Puerto Rico, and the long history of Puerto Ricans who've served in every major conflict since World War One, as well as the impact of war on civilians living in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and how war tends to, displace people and create refugee crises around the world. So those were important things in this show. For this show, we had a percussionist with 4 drums and a stool, and that's it. So, as a small company, my director used to say, look, we want to be mobile wherever, we want to be able to perform, pack up and go do a show anywhere. So that's made it easier for us, having kind of a small group. If we had unlimited money, I mean, international tour easily.
There you go.
I'm talking Japan to Hawaii and everywhere else.
Get the plane.
Europe. I would totally, that would be, to be able to share that work. And going to Puerto Rico last year, I also did a theater workshop at William Kendridge's Center for Less Good Idea in Johannesburg, South Africa in 2023. Wow. I did a 2-day workshop there in a community performance. Amazing, life-changing experience. Just having the opportunity to just share with, to engage with broader communities would be, that continues to be my goal.
How about it, Steve? What kind of equipment you got now, and what's the dream?
Tony, can I call you Tony, or is Anthony? What's your favorite?
Of course. No, I go by all of the versions.
Cool.
Tony, Anthony.
Tony, I gotta say, man, that could be like a USO tour right there, especially because you're talking to the younger, right? And that's that intergenerational thing that you can do. And it's kind of like, hey, man, here's this thing. You don't have to use it today, but you can put it in your pocket. Right. And there might come a time when that becomes important. You know what I mean? And that might, be a wonderful way to share your message in an important way, I want to say that, in 2020, in February 2020, VetArt was awarded a 3-year advocacy contract, innovation advocacy contract, state mental health. We did 18 pop-up cafes around the state of California. And in 2023, for our final pop-up, we had 120 veterans in the West Steps of the state capitol here in California. And the program officer from the state mental health came up and showed up to that event. And we had people we had Aaron Toole throwing pots. We had painters. We had people doing craft. We had a drum circle. We had a listening event. We just had this ebullient upflow of creativity that was happening. And the state mental health contractor was just, we never thought we could ever see anything like this with veterans. And I'm like, yeah, it's here. You know what I mean? And so, we're kind of building this idea of a multi-county collaborative through state innovation funds. And that, could be the southern end of the state of California, countywide, and really bring arts practice, because, Tony, what you're doing, and I think what VetArt is doing, is it's art first, right? and the art is the vehicle, and that we can really help people through this idea of like, hey man, here's this thing, and you can take it apart and put it back together, rearrange it, paint it a different color, dance on it, tap on it, beat on it, swing it, and that you can totally make it your own. And we don't have that many options in our lives to do that. But there's a certain amount of agency that happens. So this kind of idea of innovation fund, it could be San Diego County. That's 5 years with an evaluation, leveraging over 30 cultural, educational, or veteran service organizations to give out some kind of programming to veterans, active duty, spouses, dependents, and most importantly, caregivers. You know what I mean?
You bring that up there, Steve.
It up,
yeah,
you're right, in a big way, because if we're going to go against isolation, here's the community opening up creatively, right?
Yeah,
and that is, I think, really important.
And Steve, let me ask about that. You just kind of casually went right over it. We don't have any big military bases down here in South Florida, but you've got Pendleton, you've got a bunch of places there. How does it work with active duty? And you just mentioned active duty spouses and stuff like that, and families. Tell us, how's that working?
Like we got a guy named Bryce. He's a sergeant, 26 years old, and and he's like, dude, we need more of this because we have some people making really poor choices on base because they work hard. The military is, you're focused, but outside of that, they may not have, like, what do you do with that extra time? Yeah. Vet Art is also a skill bridge location, so we're the only DoD authorized arts organization doing arts programming with transitioning service members. So they come and get their DoD salary for up to 6 months, and then we work with arts practice, public health, advocacy, nonprofit management, gallery management, to kind of give them kind of like, hey man, here's this thing, and where do you want, if you want to dig into it. And we've had a few people, do that. We also have spouses coming in. We have one, she's working on her master's in education. So she's, interning at Vet Art and interested in teaching art, of course. But the Skill Bridge location, which my good friend Anthony LeBeau talked me into it, is getting, because, people join the military for all different reasons, man. And some of them are like, hey, man, all I wanted to do was do art, and everyone told me I couldn't make a living at it. But 6 years later, I'm coming out of the service, and I have this GI Bill, and I can, like, go study what I want. And I want to get back to that singular focus, right? And what a great thing that Vet Art can be, kind of that, hey, man, here's your leg up, man. Here's a space. Have at it. You know what I mean? And it's in community, and caregivers, that's an important component. I mean, we did some stuff down in Coronado, enough said, right? And these are all kids, had veterans go down and do a workshop with these kids, right? And, SEAL Command is down there, dude. And it's like, someone's been deployed for 6 months, and now the other parent's going to be deployed, and the kid's in 5th grade. That whole family's deployed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
and Anthony, tell us about yours, because you mentioned casually working with local Native American tribes and stuff like that. Your family, you do all the family work too out there with all that kind of stuff in building.
Yeah. In 2016, they had a kind of a veteran initiative to go to to protest the Standing Rock pipeline in North Dakota, and I went and I spent a week up there, and I got to tell you, one thing I'll never forget is seeing how many Native Americans through multiple generations are veterans. It was always the hats. Vietnam veteran, Iraq War veteran, Afghanistan veteran. I saw that. I also will never forget how many times I was thanked for just showing up and standing in solidarity with the Native American community. They were, everywhere I turned, I was being just thanked for just showing up, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot. And I started grad school at Barry University, so master's in social work. At the time, I started my theater company. So as I'm learning about engaging the community on, you know, the impact of a person, and I'm thinking my perspective of a veteran leaving the military, kind of leaving that identity and purpose, and then being plopped back out into the big old world with like, who am I now? Where do I go from here? And I think Steve hit on it with his work expanding to just not only the military and the veteran person, you know, it's the impact where they go to school, where they're working, their family members. I think engaging them and informing them on these experiences. It was almost every performance a family member saying, "Thank you so much." Even veterans bringing their family members and saying, "Look, I can't say this stuff, but they're going to say it, so you can kind of, you know." But then it gave them a chance to talk and connect. So that was really beautiful to see, you know, veterans bringing their children. And, you know, one veteran said, you know, my children live this every day. I just struggle with articulating what I've been through and what I continue to go through. So this just helps us kind of find language around it. So that's been really fulfilling. Steve, I just want to say thank you. I feel like people feel it needs to be the veterans taking the initiative to engage the community, or the community that needs to like fix the veterans. And this is all hands on deck. This is everyone coming to the table. Yeah. You know, right? And we need,
everyone has
you know,
something to bring. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
Everyone has something to bring to the table, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, I just got this little thing," right? But that little thing, right? And hey, man, if I do anything else, how about we just normalize creative expression?
Yeah.
You already feel like a freak. Let's not double down on that, right? Let's normalize that. That's I mean, especially
Just
when you
play.
hear what's going on
Yeah.
with spouses responding. What'd you do to my spouse? What, huh? They're like, really? You know, I mean, that's amazing stories that we have.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And, you know, we don't have a big arts community, veteran arts community in South Florida. We really don't. I have friends and artists, Aaron Hughes in Chicago. I'm friends with Aaron Toole in the Bay Area. New York has a big community.
Yep.
A few years ago, I was getting a bit demoralized. I was doing workshops and outreach and speaking engagements, and I was feeling, but I really kind of got reinvigorated by meeting vets around the country and building that kind of artist community through, you know, Warrior Writers, an organization, the Emerging Veterans Art Movement, which is just a collective, a national collective of artists that I'm a part of. There's a Veteran Art Triennial in Chicago every 3 years. The next one is going to be Veterans Day 2026. It's a 4-day arts conference, visual and performing arts across the city, by veterans, civilians, educators, researchers. Really, really beautiful project. And I got a grant from the Broward County Cultural Division to me last year. It's a long story, but I got a grant to pay an artist to mentor me for a year. Then I got a grant from the Broward County Cultural Division here in Fort Lauderdale to create a visual art exhibition. How bold of me as a theater artist to think that I secured a location 2 months before the grant deadline and scrambled. I was like, I don't even know what exhibition labels are. And my friend and mentor, Adrienne Chadwick, who actually works for Broward County Libraries.
She's my boss.
Oh, the patience and the compassion of her to take this overzealous veteran to do an exhibition. I called it An Island in the Shape of a Prison. It was about my Puerto Rican heritage and my time at Abu Ghraib prison. And I pulled it off. It was so much work. I combined poetry from my shows. I created several mixed media pieces. I used photographs. I'm really proud of it. It was so much work, all due respect to visual artists. And at this point, I can't stop. I have a Google document of ideas. I'm watching Art21 on YouTube, and the Louisiana channel has great. I just love hearing about artists and how they create and why they create. And I'm kind of got the bug right now, so I'm working on doing a lot more visual work in the coming years. It's very exciting.
if we can share what I said earlier about channeling experience, you know what I mean? That is where it's at. You know what I mean? Because if we can channel the experience, then that someone else can feel that. And then when they can feel that, they have a chance of having empathy around them, right? And and Aaron Toole, he's told me, it's like, yeah, if Thich Nhat Hanh could say the American veteran can heal themselves, then they can heal America, right? Because there's an opportunity there that may not, it's like service doesn't stop because you're out of uniform. You know what I mean? It doesn't. Here's another way to serve that I found that's really deeply personal and fulfilling, and you know, and you get some interesting conversations through advocacy. You know what I mean? So,
Okay,
Yeah.
here's the hard question. Oh, go, Anthony, first. You go first.
I just wanted to share a military parent asked if I could walk her through the exhibition and just kind of share my story last year. That was the coolest thing to just her son is 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg, and he's young and she's scared, and that was a really fulfilling experience just to be able to share my work and my perspective on that, and for someone who was really struggling to understand what that experience is like, and was seeking to learn more.
nice.
I know that feeling. Okay, so here's the question. You guys are both really excellent conversation. You guys have both done a lot of really, really good things. Tell me, what did you fail at? What went wrong, and what did you learn from it that made you better now?
There's
Go
a
for
long
it, Anthony.
list.
Yeah, you know what? I failed multiple times in okay. When we first did this writing workshop 10 years ago, he said, "We're going to perform this." And he said, "That involves memorizing your lines." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, sir. First of all, I'm not a performer. I'm not an actor. I, with my anxiety levels trying to get me to retain all of this information and then stand up in front of people. We know how most folks feel about public speaking. I can read all day. I enjoy public speaking, but you want me to memorize these lines and move around? It was so scary, so much, in fact, that because of me, our first performance, it was more or less a staged reading. We were doing movement and there were music cues, but because I struggled so much to memorize lines, that we actually had little booklets that we were, and I was reading the most. But my director said everyone has to have a little booklet. We can't just have Anthony doing it. And I struggled with that throughout. I mean, I don't know how many shows we've done, maybe 15 or 12, but here and there, dropping lines, as they say. And I was always nervous about that. As much as I prepared, there's nothing like your throat getting dry and you're 30 minutes into a piece and you go blank, and theater is not, there's no cuts, there's no takes. It's one shot. We're doing this 70-minute plus performance. There's no scenes, there's no intermissions. It's one take. Talk about walking a tightrope. And there were times where I would flub. There were times when my other performers would help me. And, I would really feel like, damn it, and my director would always come after the show and say, this is what theater is. And it's not about being perfect. And that's what's actually beautiful about it.
It's about being live.
So I had to prepare best I can. And I tell you what, guys, my last two shows last year, Puerto Rico and Dallas, I worked so hard. I just wanted that piece that we're done touring that production. I worked so hard to do my best, and I'm really proud that I was able to kind of nail, for the most part. They were smooth performances, but it was countless times, going blank, flubbing, missing a step, but it's also part of the whole experience. So
tell us, Steve.
No, I appreciate that. And, being in the ceramics world, everything's like a failure, but you can fail a bunch of times so you can evaluate your thinking about what you were doing. And so there's an opportunity for you to kind of like learn a few things, even with a hard head like mine. Um, but I do think that, failure is sometimes not slowing down enough to hear when people share things with me. And I don't necessarily, it's like, I have to like, when Yoda talks to Luke in Return of the Jedi, and he says, "You never where you were," meaning his head was someplace else. And it's and when people, you don't know who comes into the studio and what they're carrying in their heart, and when they want to share that, and maybe we've built a rapport, or we've built trust, or something about working in the material has spurned something in them, right? And they may be the first time being confronting that for them personally, and then to share it. And there's been times that people have shared with me, and I wasn't there for the moment, but I've learned that I can be there for that moment.
Yeah.
Having a good breath.
Yeah.
And to just be there. And because, man, sometimes we don't know what's in people's hearts, man. And we're asking them to kind of share that sometimes, in a very vulnerable way.
That's beautiful. And I tell you what, I've been a licensed, I've done a lot of therapy as a therapist for the last several years, mostly with first responders, veterans, police, and whatnot. And it's a very human response and one that I think we always want answers for things. And sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've learned that over the years.
I don't know a lot, you know what I mean? And when we did that work over on Coronado, those kids, they had the basics of stoicism on the wall, and these are all grade school kids, right? And number one thing to think about, right? Worry about what you can control. You know what I mean? And they're teaching kids this stuff. You know what I mean? That's some pretty deep stuff, because the kids are thinking about what's going on. You know what I mean? Can you imagine what those kitchen table discussions are like? You know what I mean?
That could be fun.
And it's not about always having the right answer. Sometimes it's just holding space with someone. Sometimes things don't have to be even said.
Absolutely. And sometimes people, it's like they might be having a moment, and it's like, that's okay. You can have that moment here. It's better out than in, man. Better out than in.
Okay, guys. Now, final question for you. We've already gone almost 50 minutes already. We just flown by here.
Yeah.
Let me give you one more question, though, because there's going to be people out there that are going to say, wait, this sounds amazing. I want to be part of that. What can someone do to be part of this kind of movement? Because you guys both have a movement going on. What can people do to help, to grow, to participate? How does someone else get involved like this?
I'm going to jump out on this, and I'm going to go out on a limb, and this was like really passion work for me, right? I started this because I believed in it, and I knew what it meant for me, and kind of kept holding that flag up. And people come by, and I'm like, hey man, what are you good at? You want to work in the studio? We got the studio. If that ain't your thing, but you believe in the mission, there's 12 different shit pipes here. Grab one and start holding it up. Because, and don't worry, you got to hold it over your head. It's going to run down in your armpits, and it's going to be behind your ears. But you just got to hold it up, man. And if you can do that, then we can move this thing a little bit forward, right, through another step. Because there's a lot of people that look at this work, that isn't valued. And so much in our culture doesn't support creative work until you get to be George Lucas, right? But all the other stuff that happens before George Lucas, that isn't valuable. But at the end of the day, we're sharing the stories that matter, right? And so I just think, how do we do more of that?
Man, is that a tagline? Sharing the
By the
stories
way,
that matter.
right over here, well, that's not only a huge bobblehead from Star Wars, but that is Yoda's cane right there. I just wanted to share that. I'm a Star Wars fan. I digress. You know what? I would say engage and explore, or maybe the other way around. Explore and engage. We might not have a burgeoning veteran artist community in South Florida, but there's a huge arts community, from Perez Art Museum to the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach and everything in between. I go to exhibitions. I'm going directly to Barry University for an exhibition right after we're done on this call. Just getting out there, whether it's ceramics classes, writing classes, just engaging and trying. And it totally, I did this mask making workshop with clay at the Norton Museum last year. And I was like, I felt like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I kept asking for help. And the instructors were like, no, this is just play, and I knew I was like, oh no, this is an exercise in vulnerability for me to do something that I don't know how to do well. And I have that mask right here next to me and I'm so proud of it. And it's fun. And I intend on exploring printmaking as well as ceramics in the future. So I think having an open, a willingness to get out there and see what's going on, is a great way to get started. A lot of these arts institutions offer workshops.
Yeah.
Anthony, I want to jump in because I want to blow the horn for you a little bit. But if you can hear our voice and you work at a cultural institution across the world, call Anthony up and go, hey, can you bring that to here? Because we got a budget to bring him here. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because this is experiential stuff, right? And when you get to experience firsthand, right, the visceral component, right, that's where rubber meets the road. So, support it, support the work, support the veterans, right? Give them a show.
And the contact information is in the chat for you, folks. Reach out to both Anthony and Steve. These guys are doing good work on both coasts. Thank you both very much for being here. Let's throw up this final slide. As I said, information for our guests is in the chat for you. Thank you, everybody, for staying, and we will see you next month. Have a great holiday, everyone.
Thank you.